Hi, everybody. My name is John Semankiewicz. I'm with Beer Law Center. I've got just a couple of seconds today to tell you a little bit about us. We're one of the sponsors and speakers here at the virtual conference. We're a small law firm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we have devoted our practice to alcohol producers and sellers, breweries, wineries, meaderies, cideries, kombucha, you name it, we've worked on it before. If you have a question, give us a call. We don't charge for initial consult, and if we don't have the answer, we'll help you find somebody who does. You can reach us at 919-335-5291. It's a telephone number. If you don't like that, just drop me an email at john@beerlawcenter.com, john@beerlawcenter.com, or find us on social media at Beer Law Center. We'd love to hear from you and help you grow your business. Have a great day.
Good morning. I assume I could say good morning, right? Can I timestamp this thing? Yeah, I'm going to timestamp it. Good morning, everyone. Well, this is a live audience, so I'm just going to go into it. So, little quick story as to how this presentation came about. Client approached me in October and let me know that they needed to raise $200,000 to get them through the winter months. Okay. They came to me and said, Chris, we need, summer was strong. Q3 was status quo. We're gearing up for November, December, and we need some cash to get us through January, February, and March. I know we're going to need the cash. And I was like, what happened to your ERC? What happened to the PPP? What happened to the cash war chest you had going on? They're like, it's all gone. It's all gone. Where'd it go? We don't know. But what do you mean you don't know? So there was a little bit back and forth. And they said, we're going out to raise cash. I said, before you go raise cash, let me do a quick analysis for you. Let me do a quick analysis as to actually what's going on within your business units. At the end of this presentation, there's going to also be a offer and a offer where we tell you where we will do the analysis for you. So this next 30 to 45 minutes, I just want you to sit back, relax. It's right before lunch, and absorb the information. You don't need to feverishly write down notes. You just need to hear what I'm saying, because I'm going to go through some graphs, some storylines, some P&Ls. It's going to be a wide range of things, but your job for the next hour is just to relax and wait and absorb the information that we put, because the offer at the end is going to be pretty cool. My name is Chris Farmand. I'm the founder and principal of Small Batch Standard. We are an accounting, tax, and consulting firm for alcohol beverage manufacturers. We've really morphed from a traditional CPA firm into what I call a financial agency, and we encompass many, many areas of the finance section when it comes to working with alcohol manufacturers. This is our wonderful team that helps us every day move the needle forward. I could not do it without every single one of them. And yeah, our sole mission is to help craft breweries grow more profits. Cool. So let's get started in this thing. Who can recall 2015? What was going on in 2015, right? If we take a look at this graph here, from 2012 to 2015, we've labeled this period of time as the Big Bang, right? This was a period where it was all smiles, no frowns. You were selling every drop of beer that you made. You were also attending festivals. You were going on the morning radio show. You were going on late night show. Your beer was appearing in TV, movies. You were basically a rock star. And from 2012 to 2015, the number of breweries doubled in the United States, right? If we look at 2024, where we are today, right? We've been through some stuff, right? So after 2015, 2018 to 2019, or really 2016 to 2019, we consider this as the plateau for breweries. So growth had slowed down a bit, and there were still breweries coming online, but not as fast as 2012 to 2015, right? 2019 was rough. 2019 was getting rough. There was a lot of players in the space, and then COVID hit. Okay. I'm a big believer that what's happening now in craft 23, 24 should have happened in 2020. But we all got can I call it a stay of execution? Is that too dark? Is that too offensive? But really, the COVID money was a stay of execution. We received tons of cash, and it really allowed us to continue operating through 2020 and 2021, which we call the rescue. I call it a stay of execution. And here we are, 22 and forward, right? The reckoning. So what's the problem? Here at SBS, we've identified the problem is that breweries in 2024 are operating with a 2015 mindset. Okay? 2024, we're operating with a 2015 mindset. I'm going to explain a little bit more what that means, but what we're going to go over today really is encouraging you to consider a fundamental shift in the way you think about your business. Okay. So the example today, and this is strictly a fictitious company, but it happens to be called Downtrend Beer Co. We are going to go through what happened to Downtrend Beer Co. over the years and what are our recommendations, right? The first thing that I look at whenever I consider any brewery and we're doing any consulting for a brewery is what you're looking at here. This is called a rolling 12. And the rolling 12 tells me a ton about your brewery. It tells me a lot about what's going on with the operations, the profitability, so on and so forth. If you'll notice the green line, if I ran a rolling 12 for every single person on this call, 99% of you would follow this pattern of the green line. This is top line revenue. This is your sales, right? So when you opened, you began at 0 and it was off to the races. Revenue grew and grew and grew. And then the plateau happened. And then you saw a little bit of growth and a little bit of decline, a little bit of growth, a little bit of decline. Then COVID hit. We got a huge cash inflow, but sales dipped. And that's where you see the drop off in 2020. Okay. Then most of you had a bounce back in 2021 and 2022 with all the love for local. And we have what I call the Nike swoosh. Okay. 99% of you would follow this exact same trend as far as sales go. All right. The next thing we look at in this rolling 12 is cost of goods sold, which is the gray line. I want COGS to track revenue because at the end of the day, we're calculating what we sold, not what we bought to make the beer, but actually what we sold. And for these purposes, it does a decent job. It does a decent job. It tracks, it stays relatively the same as revenue, and the gap is relatively consistent. All right. The last thing that I want to talk about on this screen is the EBITDA, right? EBITDA, or if you're using QuickBooks Online and the chart of accounts is set up properly, that's going to be your net operating income. Okay. Net operating income, or EBITDA, is what you keep from the operations of the business, the cash that you keep on the operations of the business. Now, you may spend that cash on capital equipment. You may spend it on inventory. You may spend it to pay down debt. But This is an indicator of how much cash the business is generating. And any business wants EBITDA to track green revenue. Why would we be in business if we sell more but keep less? We want to sell more and keep more. So EBITDA tracks the green here, and it looks pretty comfortable. I'm going to skip over the G&A. I'm going to get to that in a minute, but for our purposes here, G&A is really everything below. It's your general and administrative expenses. It's everything below the cost of goods sold, right? It encompasses your labor, it encompasses your advertising, your occupancy, your leasing, keg leasing, utilities, travel, meals and entertainment, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So let's move on. Let's check out the 2023 profit and loss for Downtrend Beer Co. They did 4.6 million in sales, taproom heavy. We like to see that. Cost of goods sold. And we condensed the G&A section. Okay. We could have given you a 50-line chart of accounts, but for the purposes of this talk, we condensed it. We did highlight what we call the biggest offenders, right? Your biggest expenses. And then we lumped everything else into other. But Downtrend Beer Co. is currently for 2023 operating at a $23,000 loss. Okay. So if you're looking at the graph and you look at the P&L, what should Downtrend Beer Co. do? What should they do to right the ship? Because, if at the end of the day, they are operating, their net operating income is a negative 23,000, it's not terrible. It's not too terrible. However, it's not sustainable. So what should they do? All right. Old playbook. When I talk about the old playbook, I'm talking about a 2015 mindset. Okay. We're in 2024. We're nearly a decade later. Old playbook. Reduce taproom costs. Get a new location. Get a canning line. Move into regional distribution. Hire a director of sales. Launch a new beer. Find new investors. Find new capital. Do these suggestions resonate with anything that you have going on right now in the business and some maybe a potential solution on how to right the ship? We've identified these were applicable and the right move in 2015. Maybe not so in 2024. All of these things in 2020, all of these things that worked in 2015 are not working today. And that got us back to here, right? This is the same exact rolling 12 we looked at a minute ago. And I'm going to pause and talk about the G&A, right? I don't have to tell you that your G&A expenses have steadily increased over time, right? And this graph proves that out. That G&A expenses, regardless of what revenue is doing, regardless of what COGS is doing, has increased over time. And I'm going to piggyback that to say that I don't believe that pricing has kept up with the increase of G&A expenses. Just gonna leave that blanket. We're going to look at detailed pricing in a minute, but I'm going to leave that as a blanket. So if revenue has had this up and down swing, COGS is okay, but G&A continues to rise, what does that tell us about the business? So my question to you is what if we began looking at your brewery in a different light? Instead of one business, all right, instead of one business, we began looking at it as many businesses and properly allocating expenses among those business units. Okay. So what we have uncovered and what we have begun working on is really analyzing the various business units in your brewery. The three big units that we've identified, of course, are taproom retail, distribution, contract, which a majority of you are doing contract or offering some sort of contract to fill capacity now. And then there's that little baby DTC at the bottom, right? That was super hot in 2020, 21, 22. DTC has really fallen off, but we needed to give it a shout out. But really today we're looking at the big three units, which are taproom retail, distribution, and contract labor, contract brewing. Let me get back on the screen here. So how does the brewery business units work, right? So it begins with separating revenue and barrels. All right. We need to know, number one, how much revenue are you receiving from the big three, and what barrel allocation is going to that revenue. All right. That's super critical to get it going. Next, we calculate COGS for each section. Now, the revenue and the COGS are relatively easy to pull together. They're relatively easy to allocate over if you're using QuickBooks classes. If you're using Xero, I'm not exactly sure what the nomenclature is there, but for our purposes today in this presentation, we're talking about QBO, QuickBooks, we're talking about Ecos, and there's ways to set it up so it can hit the right classes, and you can see this pretty easily. Enter G&A expenses. And what we identified on the rolling 12 is probably the landmine in your business. Properly allocating the G&A expenses to each of the business units. Okay. This can be done a variety of ways, right? It can be done based on revenue. It can be done based on barrels. It can be done based on square footage. It can be done. We're going to simplify it for you today, right? We're going to simplify it. And we believe we've come up with a pretty accurate look and a pretty accurate calculation when it comes to allocating what we believe is the hole in the boat. Okay. So then we can begin making changes and decisions to your business. So let's look at this. And for our purposes, we're not going to include contract brewing right now. We're just going to look at taproom, retail, and distribution. And we're going to do it based off of a barrel sold methodology. Okay. So if we look at barrels sold for downtrend over the past 12 months, they did 385 barrels. We split it 128 in taproom, 257 in wholesale distribution. That breaks down roughly to 33% taproom, 67% distro. Next thing we're going to look, we go line by line through your P&L and we say, okay, what does this G&A expense touch, right? So if we hit a taproom supplies or taproom expense account, right, none of that should be allocated to distribution. So all of it goes to taproom, right? Production labor, on the other hand, we need to allocate some to both units because your production team is actually touching both units there, right? So if we look at the barrel sold method, we go 33% taproom, 67% wholesale. There's the split there, right? And yeah, so if we look at the way that we do it, sometimes it's done based on barrels, sometimes it's done based on revenue. For today's purposes, we're going to do it just based on barrels. And I'm going to get into more details in a few minutes on how to do that, right? One last note is, so we're trying to solve a problem within the brewery, right? The graph tells us one thing, and we're going to dive into the numbers to understand what's going on and how to take and give you some steps on how to take effective action on it, right? This really isn't an academic exercise. This is a practical get into the weeds and start making some changes. So we're going to walk you through right now. We're going to walk you through Downtrend's business units and how we come up with the calculation there. All right. So as I mentioned before, 2023 financials, if we look at the net operating income over revenue, we're at a negative 0.5% in earnings, in earnings profit. Okay. Once again, not too terrible, but at the same time, unsustainable over a long period of time. Right. So if we begin to split it out, we're going to look at taproom off to the left. We're going to look at distribution off to the right. So first thing we do is just split the revenue out, right? So 2.7 in taproom sales, 1.8 in wholesale revenue. Then we look at cost of goods sold on the taproom side, and then we bring in the G&A. All right. If we look at the business unit just for the taproom, and we compare it to the SBS benchmark for taproom earnings as a percentage of revenue, this taproom's killing it. They're doing really, really well. We like to see taprooms generate somewhere between 12 and 18% EBITDA. This one's at 19.7. So I'm really happy with what's going on here. Now, if we go over to the COGS side, we generated 1.8 million in revenue. COGS were nearly 50%. Okay. Then we look at our G&A. All right. And you'll notice something here. We allocated 0 advertising to wholesale to really stress the point that we got an issue. We have an issue on the wholesale side. We allocated it all to advertising, which some of it has to be for wholesale, right? If you're doing nearly $2 million in wholesale, there's some ad dollars going out there. But for these purposes, we said, let's allocate all this to advertising and really let's allocate all this to taproom. Let's really bog that business unit down and see how it shakes out. When it shakes out, we're still operating at a negative 31.3% profit. Negative. Okay. Whereas your taproom benchmark should be 12 to 18%, distribution, we're looking at somewhere between 1 to 5% in wholesale. We're looking at 1 to 5%. So this business needs to make up roughly 35% to get within our range. And how are they going to do that, right? So some of you may be looking at this and saying, hey, Chris, we do this every day. We're good. We're awesome. But it doesn't end here, right? We've identified the hole in the boat. We've identified distribution. Now we need to go one step further to figure out what's causing that hole. What's causing the leak to come up with a negative 31.3% in earnings. Okay. And so we know it's coming from wholesale. We know our highest selling SKUs are half barrels and 12-ounce cans. We got to get into the numbers. We got to break it down. And a lot of this information is going to be pulled from Ecos. It's going to be pulled from the P&L, and it's put together to come up with this. So right now we have half barrel kegs selling at an average of 147. We have 12-ounce cases at around 28 a case. Okay. If we look at hops, malt, chemicals, packaging, waste, and stuff, this is how it all breaks down for our calculation of half barrels and 12-ounce cans. Okay. If we leave it if we leave it just as this, right? If we leave it with this, we're still, in my opinion, this isn't comparing apples to apples. Okay. When we are looking at what's causing this massive loss in our business, I think we need to come to a common denominator, a common factor where we can look at any SKU across the board, convert it, and compare it side by side. Okay. So in this case, we're going to go per barrel. If you notice this was just straight up what it costs to the hops in the half barrel, the malt in the half barrel versus the 12-ounce cans, right? This slide does a conversion to bring it all to barrels. So when we're looking at the half barrel kegs, we're generating roughly around 294 a barrel. Cases, 386. Hops cost us 29.29, 47, because we've brought it down to a common denominator. You'll see on the packaging, of course, your packaging per barrel on cans is going to be far greater than the keg collars and caps that we allocate when it comes to draft beer, right? And then down at the bottom, waste and stuff, we allocated a little bit more to cans because you know as well as I do, there's just a lot of gibberish that goes on when we're canning on canning day, and stuff just gets thrown out. So this gives me an apples to apples comparison, and it begins to illuminate a few things for me. Okay, it begins to illuminate a few things for me, and we're going to look at that, right? So we have our revenue per barrel, we have the sum of our COGS per barrel, we have our gross profit per barrel, and then we have our gross margin per barrel. All right. So currently we're sitting on half barrels at 63%. 12-ounce cases, we're at 49%. Now, you'll notice we haven't worked in our G&A yet. This is just money coming in, and this is cost of goods sold and gross profit and gross margin. We still need to bake in a G&A factor to uncover what is happening with our wholesale business. So if we look at downtrends G&A per barrel, it comes up to $440 per barrel. Okay. And this is looking at every single line item underneath COGS. We're looking at every single line item underneath COGS to come up with how much is allocated to wholesale, how much is allocated to 12-ounce cases. Right? So when we allocate the 440, we have our revenue per barrel, we have our COGS per barrel, we have our G&A per barrel, then we have our net operating income or EBITDA per barrel. And we can see very clearly here where the loss is coming from, right? So we're currently losing 255 in EBITDA when a barrel of kegs go out, half barrel kegs go out, and we're losing 253 when a case goes out in barrels. So does this make sense? Does this make sense, breaking it down this way and looking at a apples to apples comparison when we're looking at this? I forgot to say in the beginning, if anybody has questions, just you can go ahead and fire them in the chat. I don't see any questions here, but yeah, this begins to get the wheels turning as to decisions that we have to make, right? This begins the mental game of like, what hard decisions do we have to make to get this going? All right. If we want to look at it as an EBITDA percentage per barrel, right? Because that would be important as well, right? We look at revenue, we look at COGS, we look at G&A, and half barrel kegs are currently contributing 87% negative. 12-ounce cans are contributing a negative 65%. Okay. That not the direction we want to be going in. But this also kind of tells us what we need to do, right? This also kind of tells us, puts us in a direction of what we need to do, right? All right. So let's talk about, we've looked at the numbers. Now let's talk about the decisions and the direction we need to go in, right? So certainly, if we look at the percentages, we need to change our keg strategy, right? We either need to raise prices or shift production away from kegs, or potentially both, right? If you happen to be at the top end of your pricing for half barrel kegs, then, and the distributor or the accounts let you know that you're at the top end of pricing, then we need to go back and look at either COGS or that G&A number, right? If you happen to be heavy on half barrels, we all should know that sixtels happen to be our highest profit margin SKU in wholesale. So can you shift some of that business from half barrels to sixtels? Right? Okay. Next, we need to address the G&A. We saw it in the graph. We saw it in the breakdown calculation per barrel. $440 of G&A per barrel is a lot. That's a lot. And to address the G&A, we just have to do a deep dive line by line. Where is the money going? Where are the expenses coming from that are generating such a large G&A factor, which is driving our profit down? We need to analyze our portfolio, right? We happen to look at half barrels and 12-ounce cans as examples. We need to look at styles. We need to look at packaging types. We need to really analyze it. And then we have to make some hard decisions as to what we do with our wholesale program, right? If you recall, I mentioned the goal of wholesale as an EBITDA percentage is 1 to 5%. There isn't a whole lot there. There isn't a whole lot there. However, in most cases, breweries are running at a substantial negative when it comes to that wholesale business, and the tap room is masking the loss. This analysis should uncover where the loss is coming from and allow you to make some difficult decisions, right? Now, can't just stop at the wholesale, right? That we got to talk about recommendations for the tap room, right? So keep doing what you're doing. It's working. You're above the SBS benchmark. Rock on. Let's build on the success, right? Do you need to open a location? Do you need to partner with a food person to bring in a permanent food program? What can you do to keep the success going? Because you're doing something extremely well. So let's compare old playbook versus new playbook, right? 2015 to 2024. Get a canning line, reduce taproom costs, move into regional distro, find new investors. The new playbook. Stop distributing kegged IPA if that happens to be the SKU that's we analyze. Reduce distribution overhead. Double down on the tap room, retail. And what's next? So if you want to take a swing at this on your own, right? In QuickBooks, you want to run a year-to-date P&L report when you get back to your computer, or you're probably at your computer right now, but you run a year-to-date P&L report. Put it in Excel, split the revenue by business units. Hopefully your chart of accounts is at least capturing just revenue in those various accounts. You can split them out. Find the COGS for each section, either from the P&L or the back of the napkin. You can put something in there for COGS, and then allocate all other expenses. Okay, allocate all their expenses with the methodology we laid out. Just do it based on barrels now. Do it as a percentage based on barrels sold in the tap room versus wholesale, and give that a look. Now, remember, if you get to a line that's called tap room costs or brewery like tap room expense, right? That's 100% is going to be allocated to the tap room. If you get to brewery expense, and what we call brewery expense is usually the expense of chemicals, yeast, gas, other small items that you need throughout the brewing process. That may lean heavier to wholesale rather than heavier to tasting room, right? So use your judgment there, and then take action, right? Nothing in this talk should be new to you. Nothing in this talk should be expressing doom and gloom. All we're asking you to do is understand the true profitability of each of the business units and then make decisions. I'm not suggesting you get rid of wholesale. I'm not suggesting that you stop it or make some drastic decisions. All I'm asking you to do is just figure out the reality of what's going on within your brewery. All right. So you can do that, or we can do it for you. We can do it for you. We've done, I think, 300 of these so far. So I really encourage you to go to sbstandard.com/CBP, fill out the form, and someone will be in touch. Someone will be in touch. We send you a beautiful 2-page analysis. There's some recommendations in there. There's a business unit breakdown. There's a revenue breakdown. And we even uncover some of our benchmarks to you in there. So I encourage everyone who's watching this, either live or recorded, to please go to sbstandard.com/CBP, fill out the form, and we will be happy to do everything that you saw in my presentation today. It's really cool. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? Looking at my screen over here, I don't see any. Oh, private chat. Yeah. I don't see any questions. If some questions arise or you'd like to chat about this, feel free to email me, chris@sbstandard.com. We can talk about it. Yeah, chris@sbstandard.com, and we can talk about it. Or if I can't talk about it, I'll get you in touch with someone who can talk about it. Awesome. Thank you so much.